So I'm going to jump in because we're actually right at 7 o'clock and it looks like we have a quorum and I want to be respectful to everybody, but especially our guest time. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Dawn, are you still good with taking minutes?
I'm still good with taking minutes.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to jump into the roll call. So Liz Rivard-Weston, I'm here. I'm going to go through this list. Commissioner Shar Douglas.
Here.
Ashley Jericho.
Here.
Travis Moore.
Here.
Don Rapinski.
Here.
Eileen Krupa. So Eileen's not present. I guess I didn't know if I needed to say her name. She did email me, so it is considered an excused or a notified absence.
Right.
And then our standard guests, we have Deputy.
What about Andrew?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going off of the last minutes. I'm sorry. Drew Steffs.
We have a couple people connecting to audio, and there's another Margaret Blunt. So
Okay, it actually looks like there's 3 right now.
Oh, okay. Who's green? Who's the real Margaret? We need to rename some people.
Right.
There are 2 Margaret Blounts I see and 1 Jody Ellison.
I got 3 Margaret Blondes.
I have 3 Margarets and a Judy. Is that like a full house? I don't play poker, so is that a good thing?
Ashley needs to be renamed. Ashley has her camera on.
Okay, so that's
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
Want to remind you that you do need to say where you're at.
Oh, we do? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I wasn't aware.
Maybe we didn't do that last time. Yeah, the new rules, we have to say where we're at. You can just.
Do we want to just start over, Liz?
So just I want to clarify, do you need like our address or?
No. Just I'm calling from Royal Oak, or I'm calling from Oakland County, or.
Got it. Okay. I'm sorry, everyone.
No, yeah, I should have.
Technically,
Does it have to be in the minutes?
It's voting members. Shar.
Go ahead, Char.
technically, the rule is city, county, state. That's what the law said.
City, county, state. Okay. So I'm Elizabeth Rivard-Weston, Royal Oak, Oakland County, Michigan.
Do I have to put this in the minutes?
Yes.
And it's only voting members, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
So next up is Shar,
Royal Oak, Oakland, Michigan.
Ashley,
Royal Oak, Oakland, Michigan.
Travis,
Royal Oak, Oakland, Michigan.
Dawn.
Royal Oak, Oakland, Michigan.
Then we've established Eileen is not present, and we've not heard from Drew.
I'm on.
Oh,
I
Drew.
video on a sec. Yeah.
Okay.
Just finishing up dinner. This is Andrew Steffes, Royal Oak, Oakland County, Michigan.
Thank you, Drew. All right, and then our regular guests that always attend, we have DC Frazier, he's here, and then Jody Ellison, the shelter manager, is also joining us.
Sure.
So I just want to check, Carol, did we check your boxes? Are we good?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to our special guests before we start the formal meeting. So go ahead, Shar.
I was just waving at Mitzi and her cat.
Okay. So before we get into the formal meeting, to respect our guest time, I thought it'd be best just to jump into chatting with the representatives from the Friends of the Royal Oak Library, and if we are joined by the director of the Royal Oak Library as well. So I sent out the questions to everybody that we had prepared. Just a little bit of background before we dive into it. At our last meeting, which was in November, we were notified that there was a draft ordinance that has some suggestions on how the Royal Oak Animal Shelter Committee should be restructured in order to best serve the shelter. And through our discussion, it became apparent that the system or the format that the Friends of the Library and the library use may be something we'd like to consider or maybe learn more about. So obviously we haven't quite made any decisions yet, but that's why we wanted to have some of the experts here so we can learn a little bit more about, how it came to be and how it continues to operate and things like that. So before we get into the questions, I think it would be helpful for us to learn a little bit more about who our guests are. So because we're in a virtual format, I feel like it's awkward because everybody's tiles are arranged a little bit differently. So I'll go through kind of in the order of our guests. And when I say your name, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and sharing if you're with the library or the Friends and what your role is within those organizations, okay? Cool, so thank you. First up is Larry Baker.
I'm Larry Baker. I'm the treasurer of the Friends Group. I've been with, and I also manage, when we're in the building, I also manage the scanning and kind of online book selling process that we do. I've been with the Friends since 2000, something like that, about 20 years.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate
Sure.
it. Next up is Mitzi Hoffman.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I'm Mitzi Hoffman. I am currently the president of the Friends Board. I was on the board for a year before that. I actually spent 9 years on the board of trustees of the library. And now as president, I chair the meetings and try to, help us figure out what we're going to do when. That's been a challenge this past year. And I've also been scheduling and trying to oversee the volunteers that have been working in our bookshop that's located in the library.
Thank you. I appreciate
I'm
that.
Mitzi.
Next, I see John Pellegrino. Am I saying?
Yes.
Oh,
Yep,
excellent.
you got
Hi,
it.
John.
Hi, I'm the corresponding secretary for the Friends. Prior to that, and prior to Larry being treasurer, I was treasurer for 5 or 6 years, I think. And I also run the Friends social media. And in my daytime job, I work with libraries all over North America.
Excellent. Thanks.
Sure.
Next is Emily Dumas.
Hi, everyone. I actually am a library employee. I am the library director. I've been director now for 2 years. And before that, I worked as first the head of youth services. And I had worked as a part-time librarian in circulation before that since 2009.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
And next is Margaret Blount.
She indicated in an email that she doesn't have a microphone on her computer. So I'll just say she's been with the Friends about the same amount of time I've been, about 20 years, I think, maybe a little longer. If you do have a microphone, jump in, Margaret. She was president before Mitzi was. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
And I don't know, sometimes these meetings have dial-in information. I don't know, Carol, if this one does, maybe to help Margaret out.
Yeah, there is.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is dial-in. So if I need do I need to send that to her via email? She could dial in.
I can't talk. I'm sorry. Could you maybe do that?
Sure.
Just in case she chooses to. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Excellent. Well, thanks everybody. The introductions were helpful. So I'm going to basically just go to the list that we shared over email. And the first batch of questions actually came from Shar. So I'd actually love to have Shar kind of start us off and start guiding the conversation.
Okay. Not expecting that.
Sorry.
Just wanted to sort of, prime the pump a little bit. But so for the sort of 2 tiers of questions here. One is, how did the Friends of the Library come to be and how is it governed? And then there's sort of the second group of questions is, how does the Friends relate to the library function itself. So maybe I'll start with, I think it was Larry, who's been on the board for 20 years. Maybe Larry, maybe you can start us off with a brief history of the Friends.
Well, yeah, that was the one question that I wasn't real clear. I mean, it was a clear question, but I remember when I was the kid on the block, I always tell the story that I was volunteered to show up at a commission meeting with my two, at that time were my 1-year-old twin boys, because there was something going on with children's funding or the children's department funding. So I brought them up as human props to the microphone. They started playing with the prop, and I think it was Mayor Cohen at the time made it funny. But anyway, at that time, I think the Friends had been in existence for maybe 20 years prior to that, for all I know. I know Joyce Marley was on there. Mitzi can help out, but
Yeah,
I honestly don't have a whole lot of knowledge of the origin.
This is the area where we were really counting on Margaret to help us out, because she is the senior person. And I guess as far as the history goes, Liz, she sent probably the last email giving as much of the history as we have. That she sent it to me, and then I forwarded it to you, and I don't have it handy.
That's okay. I can open that up. I forgot that. Now that you say it, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. So do we want to move on to the?
Yeah, let's, if we, I mean, the history, I mean, if the Friends have been around for 40 years, perhaps some of this is not relevant. So I won't ask, who set up the Friends as a corporation, obtained 501c3 status, but how do you manage the business end of the nonprofit? I mean, that's always a challenge for a small nonprofit. You got to file an annual return. You've got to have finances that are accountable, as it were. I mean, there's the sort of the business end of the organization that can be a challenge. You may have a passion for your subject matter, but somebody's got to keep an eye on the fish in the barrel. So how do you handle the business end of your business?
Well, I guess I can tackle that as the treasurer, kind of on two levels. I mean, I manage the quarterly payments, which are pretty minor and sadly have been excruciatingly minor this year. But in that case, it's just a simple, quarterly tax payment to the state. We don't pay the IRS anything. On an annual basis, just in the last couple of years, we decided to give that information to a tax person, and they are now managing that annual processing of our taxes. So that takes a load off our back. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge, we're still a pretty small organization. It's not a big deal, but it was still nice to have a professional take that on. So basically, I mean, that's kind of on the more official end of things as far as paying taxes and communicating with the state and the federal government. In terms of ongoing income and the in and out of managing our income and paying the library, it's basically lots of pennies and dimes from people buying little kids books downstairs, and the shop and the sales that we have, and picking up envelopes when we're in the library every few days, and keeping track of that and making deposits on a regular basis at the bank. And then in terms of pay, when the funds that we pay out, I typically get requests from Emily on what programs need checks cut, and that's mostly on an as needed basis. And We drop off the checks and she distributes them. So that process is a little bit more informal.
Larry,
so
if I
that-
can add a couple of things.
Sure.
So one of the things we've done a little bit more recently is because we're a 501c3, Facebook will allow us to do fundraisers. And we've actually managed to do fairly well with that over the last year and a half. So that's another way that we raise funds, especially in the current situation. And then the other thing that I think is very notable is that we do have a memorandum of understanding with the library that really is specific as to how we support them and who else we can support or not support. And I think that's worth noting, and not to get into much detail about that, but I think it is important to know that that exists.
And I'll add to that. Actually, that memo of understanding came about after one of the other board members and I attended a conference in Lansing with other friends groups from across the state. And what was interesting to us is that we got this impression that there were some friends groups and libraries that somehow were not getting along, which was pretty surprising because that's not really what has gone on, here in Royal Oak. But the suggestion was that
Mitzi.
it wouldn't. Huh?
You'd be amazed at what I hear dealing with other libraries.
Oh, yeah. So we formalized the process, and I can, certainly send you a copy of the memo, but it just, it says stuff like the library won't charge us to use the Friends Auditorium when we meet. That's just kind of a back and forth thing. We do actually have a joint board meeting once a year between the library board and the Friends board, things like that. And it just makes things really clear for us. It seemed like something extra, but it seemed also to now be kind of state of the art as far as how the organization could work.
And it really protects both parties. It protects the library from having to deal with other nonprofits coming in and saying, how come we can't use the auditorium for free? Things like that.
It looks like Dawn. Go ahead, Dawn.
Am I unmuted? Oh, good.
You're good. We can hear you.
So is this more like a legal type of, how is this written? So, and I don't want to get really deep into it, but is it more legal?
Not really. It's not legalese.
But you also state it and put it someplace so that people understand, so the public can read it.
I'm not sure about that. It should be on our website somewhere, but
I just wondered.
It could be public information, and we'll make sure that we send it to you guys.
Okay.
How long I'm just curious, how long is the MOU for? Is it on a yearly basis, or how long is it? Like, how often does it need to be re-signed, I guess?
It's open-ended, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the pointers are pretty generic, not generic, very general,
Right.
Not typically based on any time-specific events or things like that.
I mean, it really is in line with our 501c3 filing and why we exist.
Okay.
We exist to support the library.
Okay.
So if I may, when you join what's your process for joining your board, I guess you would say, and is it managed by the city at all, or is it's fully independent, I take it?
It is fully independent, and we have gotten really our best board members from recommendations from other board members. That's kind of how things have evolved. And actually, we haven't started recruiting because we weren't sure people wanted to be a new board member and only meet via Zoom. But when we do, when we're more actively back with the library, I think we're going to have 2 openings for board members. There is a draft of there's a draft of an application to be a board member. It's been pretty informal up to this point because the people that have asked to be on the board just are very clearly, really well qualified.
Yeah, people who are engaged in the community and the library. But How many, I didn't catch this, but how many people are on the board right now? Like how big is the board?
12?
12 people. Okay, so it's sizable.
So
Okay.
we're down to 9 right now.
Right.
So I have a question that was later in the list, but it fits into what you were talking about in terms of what the MOU covers. So you talked a little bit about how the MOU states that you can use, space in the library at no cost and things like that. Do you receive, even though you're totally independent 501c3, do you receive any assistance from the city, like maybe marketing or the grant writer or anything like that? No? Okay.
Nope.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I've used the copy machine outside of Emily's office a couple times, so okay.
I won't tell. No, that's helpful. Thank you.
I got a quick question if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Of the 12 members on the board, or 12 slots, besides the regular meetings, how much time do you guys put into the actual activities of the board and the library board and things like that outside of the meetings?
It probably varies from time to time. Some of us are very involved when we do have the book sales. Depending on what time of year it is, we might have a small budget committee meeting. There's not a whole lot other than being available for the the activities that we're doing. Some of us are volunteers in the bookshop.
I mean, if you had to put an hour figure on it per month on average, could you give like a ballpark range?
I mean, I may put in more. I'm not trying to pat myself. I mean, as treasurer, I'm literally writing checks and once or twice a month driving up to the bank to make a deposit. But again, that's not, gobs of time. My volunteering time is more, but that doesn't pertain to the board specifically. So I would say as a treasurer, maybe John can, recall when he was treasurer too, in a week's time. And again, it depends on how many checks I'm getting from Emily. Sometimes, depending if it's right before summer reading, it can be 20, 25 checks, but more typically it's, just a handful. But I would say in a week's time, an hour. So, maybe 4 to 5 hours a month.
And it really does vary by role.
Yeah.
Like Larry said, he's probably the one that spends the most time in that role because there's so much to do. I manage the social media. I probably spend an hour a month, maybe. And that's usually like while I'm doing my regular job and I kind of, let me do that real quick, that kind of thing. So it really varies.
If I may, John, and if this is prying, I'm kind of curious. You mentioned your regular job. You work with libraries. Just curious in your exposure to other libraries, what in your day job, what is that?
So I work with public libraries. I work for a company called Gale. We're a reference publisher.
Yeah.
And so I am a sales rep. In normal times, I would travel to various libraries in primarily Ontario and Indiana. Right now, I used to have Michigan. Royal Oak Public Library was a customer of mine. Now I have Indiana and Ontario and a couple of states out west because we're virtual. And so I work with about 700 public libraries in my territory.
Okay, cool. No, thank you.
I'll just jump in. I used to work at the same company John works at. I was there on the editorial side.
Nice.
Until I was laid off. So I've been on my own for about 6 years. So, but I've had an interest in libraries, kind of on more on the publishing side of things.
I'm not sure.
We can hear you.
Go for it, Margaret. We hear you.
Okay. You can't see me, but I can now talk to you. I was the president of the Friends until 2 years ago when Mitzi graciously took over. I was the Friends president for 25 years. Normally the term is 2, but that's another story. Why did we I joined the Friends 27 or 28 years ago at the request of the then president. And at the second meeting, I volunteered to be the new president, and nobody else volunteered. So there I was. We have always been, I guess you could say, compatible with the library. We've been obviously through many, directors. But again, we meet once a month, other than 2 months of the year, which is usually July and December. And at that point, we have an agenda for every meeting. We talk about, and I'll give you a sample example. Okay, until March, obviously, we were meeting in person at the library. Now we're doing, just as we're doing now, Zoom meetings. But prior to that, what we would do is at that meeting, Larry, for example, would give a report on what money we had brought in that month, what money we had spent, anything that might be coming up. The biggest expense for the library is the summer reading program. So we normally started in December, January before writing checks for various events. We, the Friends, totally fund all of the programs at the library. Now, a lot of people are not aware of that. They say, oh, well, I pay my library millage. No, that goes to the library. We pay for all the programs. We pay for many of the speakers that come in. We pay, as an example, so we aren't this year because of our budget, but in the past we have purchased equipment, furniture for the library. We have sent members to various conferences. I think Mitzi, mentioned it, that when she was on the library board, that we would provide I think it was $25 a day for them to go to that meeting. And one day was for Friends members and one day was for board members. So some people attended both, some people attended one or the other. But we have always been one of the funding sources for, I guess, what I would say is what the library cannot cover in their budget. I know that Larry, I guess it's 20 years that Larry came to the city commission meeting with, I'm not sure, 2 or 4 kids in tow. And, oh, okay, 2 at the time. And talked about how important the library was, because what they wanted to do was they wanted to cut the library budget on books. And so we had several people go to the meeting and express their views, and the budget was not cut. So, but again, the budget is not the same now as it was. We also used to, and we still do, the summer reading program for the kids receive either 1 or 2 books during the summer that they're allowed to take home. For many of these kids, that's the only 2 books they might own. We also provided books for all of the 4th graders in Royal Oak, get at least, I believe it's either 2 or 3 visits to the library, and each time they get to take a book with them. That originally was co-sponsored by the Kiwanis Club. I can't tell you how long ago. It's probably been at least 10 years. They backed out of that. And so it has kind of fallen all on the board or the library Friends. We are all volunteers. I think that's already been mentioned. And our budget every year is a little different. This year, we normally have a 12-month budget. This year, we're going with a 6-month budget because we really weren't sure what was going to happen. But our chief sources of income are the 2 book sales that we have every year, and then our Friends shop. And I think Larry and Mitzi have already mention that, but our friend shop is, again, all volunteers come in. We're open 3-4 days a week. And all of the books are donated by people. So anything that we sell the books for, I guess you could say, is share profit, and we put that into our budget. So, and we decided to do the 501c3. Gosh, it's probably 15 years ago, because some of the grants that the library was trying to obtain had to go through a 501c3. And so we got the 501c3, and we were the benefactor of the money, and then we would give it to the library.
That's really helpful. Margaret.
So if I can again interject just something about
Sure.
501c3 status. When you obtain 501c3 status, you can no longer be political in any way. So for example, when that funding was cut or proposed to be cut to the library, I believe that was before there was a millage for the library. And Emily, I could be wrong about that. But when it comes to things like millages, the Friends cannot participate. Individual board members and individual members can participate, but the Friends themselves cannot. So as an entity, we have to be completely non-political.
It looks like, oh, sorry, John.
No, that's fine.
It looks like Shar has a question or a point.
A comment and then a question. Actually, 501c3 organizations can participate in the electoral process around issues, just not around candidates. So the Friends of the Library absolutely could. There's a limit on how much of your total budget you may spend on political activity, and I think it's 10%. But certainly,
I think so. I think that I don't think you're
No.
quite right on that.
It's not any more than 2 or, I believe, right? It used to be 3%, and you have to be very, very careful how you do that, because, and John can attest to this. Several years ago, I wrote up to the paper, so we had the Tribune, and I listed myself as Margaret Blount, president of the Friends of the Royal Oak Public Library. And quickly, I was told that I can put Margaret Blount down there, but I couldn't put what my title was, because as soon as I put my title down, that meant that I was representing the Friends, and I was not.
Well,
So
I strongly recommend not getting political.
Yes.
I think that's at your discretion, but it's something we historically have erred on the side of caution.
okay, I will happily research that for you, because I've done this before, and I do think there is a space where nonprofits can advocate around the issues that affect them. But putting that aside, my question is for Emily. I want to draw Emily into this to talk about how how the decisions are made as to how the money that the Friends raise, the funds that the Friends raise, gets spent. So I'm gonna kick it to Emily.
All right. So how our process for doing that is I meet, they run on a different budget year than the city too. So the Friends, their budget year starts in September and runs until August 31st, whereas the city starts on July 1st. So what we do is I meet with Larry and Mitzi sometime before then, and we discuss the outlook, and then I can make some special requests, which I get staff input on. So like they said, they've funded many special projects in the past. And then what we think we're going to be needing for programming for the year. And then from there, the Friends, Larry drafts up a budget, and then it's officially approved at a meeting. Is there anything else, Larry and Mitzi, that I'm missing in the process?
No, I think that covers it. I mean, the requests that we as Friends get from Emily from the library are pretty typical, pretty standard kinds of things. The expectations, I don't think, change from year to year. what changes, not surprisingly, is what amount we have to offer. And that's in the last couple of years, a couple things have happened. One is the sales and online sales have kind of been trending downward, so that's reduced our income. And then obviously this year, the pandemic pretty much has shut us down. So hopefully that's a a big giant temporary problem, but obviously that affected our budget for the upcoming year.
And that's where I think a memorandum of understanding is really important. Again, this has never been the case at the Royal Oak Library, but what does happen at some other libraries is it gives the Friends group discretion in how they spend, and they will turn down projects. I've heard horror stories where like they set up their own shops and kind of just became their own little organization that they could choose not to actually fund the library projects at all. And I'm not sure what they did with the funds that they raised, but they had that discretion to do so. So that's why I think it's a good call that we set up that understanding just to prevent anything like that from ever happening.
I have a question.
Well, may I continue on the same thread? So does the member of understanding say that the Friends will pay for programs? Is that part of that agreement? Emily?
I think part of it is, doesn't it explicitly say that it will support library functions? And that's kind of the important part of it, is that,
I guess what I would.
Oh, sorry. Larry and Mitzi still, and the Friends trustees still they can turn down my request. They approve their own budget. So they have say in what individual projects and everything they could fund, but it would still go to library functions.
And I think it's more to the point that we don't support other organizations than the library.
And then continuing on this same thread, and then I'll be quiet. How do the Friends relate to your staff? That is, how do you balance the expectations between those two groups?
I would say that there isn't too much interaction. Not to say that the staff, doesn't know the Friends and their friendly faces and familiar faces. But really, we kind of help them, like we help them open up the shop, and like we let them into the building. But other than that, it's just kind of they have their own area in the back where they do the sorting and the scanning. They have the Friends shop, so those are kind of their territories where we coexist. But the staff doesn't get involved in the sorting or anything like that. And then the Friends wouldn't step in and be like, the Friends have volunteered for programs in the past, but there's not an expectation that they would ever have to do anything like that.
And I will say, as a frequent volunteer, I mean, we've all volunteered, but I'm there when we're there. I'm there at least once a week to handle online sales, and we're always aware that we're separate from the staff. We don't want to ask the staff who are employees of the city to do stuff for us. Now, there may occasionally, some problem with the computer, and Ed, we get Ed, the library tech guy comes in and in 2 minutes is able to resolve the problem. So I mean, yes, things like that pop up every now and then, but for the most part, we really want to stick to who we are, which is supporting the library, but not depending on them as as helpers for us.
And I appreciate that too, and the relationship we have at Royal Oak Public Library, because I actually worked at a library where there was kind of this adversarial relationship with the Friends. It was very unusual, where the Friends would demand using the room, and you'd be doing story time and they'd be like, they're tapping their watch telling you that they needed to get in there, and they kind of just felt like they had ownership over the place, and it was just it was not a good balance at all. And I think I really admire the work the Friends group does, and I think that there's such a great working relationship between staff and between the Friends and between the library board as well.
if I can just interject about the programming, when Larry meets with the director, Emily has already spoken to her, head of youth services and her head of adult services, and they've kind of given her an idea of what programs they would like to do. Many programs are repeated year after year after year. There's a magician that comes in every summer and presents, okay? There's the, and I know I'm not going to say the right name here, but there's a farm that brings animals in outside. I have to clarify that, in outside, that the kids are able to actually see a llama or see a goat or whatever it might be. So we kind of designate a certain amount of money that, as Emily might say, well, the youth program last year ran us X dollars. We'd like that same amount of money, or we'd like to be able to do this program this year, which would add another, $200 or $300. So I would say that, we've been very fortunate in all the time that I've been on the board, that we have always been able to fill whatever needs the library had. I'm not sure that, as Larry has said, with the pandemic and our zero income or close to zero, that we will be able to support it, continue to support it. Now, this last summer, there were programs that Emily did online that, were able to pay for, but some of the people, some of the activities, they got canceled for many reasons. So again, when we meet again in June, whatever, the board meets again and we start talking about program for the fall, hopefully at that point we will not be wearing a mask and we can actually say what the program, might be. So we're kind of, this is the first year, I think, Sarah said, this is the first year that we've really had to deal with anything like this. We've always been able to obtain the money between the book sale, sending books out to be sold, the shop. We've always been able to fulfill the budget that they needed.
Thank you, Margaret. So I have actually, Margaret, you brought up a really good point a couple points ago about the fact that the library has a millage. So I was actually hoping to hear a little bit more from Emily about that. And the library has its own board. So I don't know if those are interconnected or not, but I was kind of hoping to learn a little bit more about the relationship with the library to the city, right? Because we're thinking the relationship with the shelter to the city. So I think that would be helpful for us to understand. Then also understand your board if you have one, and then how like a millage plays into all that. I hope that's all connected and not three separate questions.
No, that's fine. And I do think we're kind of similar to the animal shelter in that the library is a city department. What's a little bit unique about us is that we are not part of the city's funding. We are on an independent operating millage. So all of our funds for operation does come from this millage. It was passed in 2003 and it's a 20-year millage. It's 1 mills with the Headley rollback. I think it's at like 9.6 or something now. So we also have a governing board. Libraries have two options with boards. They can have an advisory board that just kind of, again, advises on policy and hears stuff out, but it actually does not have any voting rights on making the decisions. And those libraries are usually a city department with, they like the city commission would be voting on those decisions. Ours is actually a governing board. So they are a unit of government. They're bound by things like Open Meetings Act and bylaws, state bylaws. And they are a 9-person board usually. and they have to meet monthly. And what their role is they are my boss. So they oversee the director, they hire, evaluate, and oversee me. And they manage all the policies. So they create and vote on the policies to approve. And then they also create and approve the budget. So the Friends are really a fundraising unit. And so that's the idea behind them, is that the Friends hold the book sales and they do the book scanning. And then they support us in other ways too, like they show up at events and, they might sell stuff, they might run book sales, but their role then is to support the library and raise funds for it. Whereas, that the thing is, the board is kind of limited on what they can do. That's a real benefit to having the Friends and have them be this 501c3, is that they have a lot more freedom to do things that our governmental board really can't.
Sure. So is it possible for someone to sit on the library board and be in the Friends group? It is? Okay.
Yeah, and part of being the library board and expectation is that you will join the Friends, usually like just pay the membership and if you want to volunteer, but we have had trustees in both. Mostly recently, Catherine Reben Payne, she was a trustee for both. She ended up finding it a little bit too much to take on, so now she just does the library board, but she was doing both roles. And I thought that was interesting, and I like that because, I think it helped kind of bridge the gap.
Sure. So what, I had a question in it that floated away. Someone had mentioned that, I actually think, Emily, it was you, that you bring ideas to the Friends that you would like them to fund and they vote on it. If there's an instance that they say, no, we won't fund it, does that idea completely go away? Or is the library free to find other resources? Like how does that work?
Yeah, in that case, what we would do then is I would probably try to make it part of my regular budget. So like, let's say, a lot of times it's like a special collection or something. And if they couldn't support it that year, then I would just try to find funding within my own budget, like within my book budget to carry it out. So I would take it to the library board then, the budget committee.
I'll just mention, we have 3 different categories, general categories in terms of how we support the library: adult services, youth services, and then we have a section on our spreadsheet that's like one-time purchase type things. And those are typically things that popped up that, we could really use. The one we laugh about a lot, it was legit, but it was those giant bookends that suddenly they just really needed lots of them. Well, that was not the kind of thing that we needed to worry about every year, but we put that in our one-time category. And a couple of years ago, I know there were quite a few of those one-time purchase requests. And because our income was kind of in a changing environment, I know we were only able to, support a few of those. And so that's where we went back to Emily and said, what do you consider priority, or you want to put these aside, or do you want to handle this on your own this year? So those are the kinds of things that we would, typically go back.
And I think, as Margaret indicated, the budget committee starts meeting in June. And we vote on this in August or September to approve the budget. So there's a lot of opportunity for discussion with Emily, with the previous director. There have been directors in the past that did not give us that opportunity and showed up to the August meeting and said, I want these things, vote them up or vote them down. And we didn't like that very much.
I also wanted to mention that since we've gotten the MOU, a library board member has attended every one of our Friends board meetings, so they can kind of hear what we're saying, and then they can respond. What is the board doing? Are they putting their strategic plan together? What is that strategic plan? What are they doing? Now I want to say where is their budget, but how are things going with them, so that you know, we can then hear from them. And of course, also Emily attends every one of both our meetings and the board meetings. So she's kind of I guess you could say, a liaison between the two. And so if there is something that the friends might want to approach the board about, or the board might want to approach the friends about, we can do that. Also, part of our MOU is that we will meet together at least once a year. In other words, the library board and the friends board. And we will meet at least once a year together and just kind of see how things are going and you know, what are people's comments, because our board, there's a 3-year term on our board. And basically if somebody says, hey, I want to stay on, they stay on. Okay. Whereas with the library board, they have a 3-year also term. They are appointed to that board. And they are given, I believe it's 2 more 3-year terms. So at the end of the 9 years, they're done. They're off the board, the library board. And so that's kind of how we sometimes get, you know, we get people from their board, or vice versa, they get people from our board. So, you know, we work with them, and I guess you could say they work with us and we work with them. So I do want to mention one other thing the friends do is that there is a library week every year. And one of our board members last couple of years has gone to various places in downtown Royal Oak, Brugger's Bagels, and has had them provide bagels for all the staff one morning. They have brought in lunches. We have brought in lunches. So again, I think that we really appreciate what the librarians do, and I guess this is our way of saying, you know, thank you. Food always seems to be a great tool to thank people with. So we've done that the last several years.
That is true. And Margaret, I actually was going to ask about what you just explained about the board members and the committee members kind of working together and things like that. So thank you. You predicted my question. It looks like Travis, you had a question or a comment?
Nope, I'm good now. Thanks.
Oh, okay. And Shar, go ahead.
How do you manage and recognize donors?
Well, first of all, we acknowledge that, well, for example, the day that it was the Burger Bagels, we had a sign there that said, these are from Brugger's Bakery. Also, we have a monthly newsletter that goes out. And in that newsletter, that particular one, we will say, look, this is what we were able to do. Maybe have some pictures of the various things that we've done. John has our Facebook page. Sometimes we can put things on there to recognize groups, you know, that are in the city that have done things for us in the library, or for the library staff. So I guess that's the way we could, I guess you would say that's the way we recognize those businesses. I think Larry probably knows more than I do, so.
Well, sometimes just a visual thing, like at our book sales, Hollywood Market has been donating the bags that we use for our bag sales for many years. So try to have a little sign that, you know, thanks them, just a visual thing. A lot of our donations, you know, monetary donations are anonymous. It'll be one of those, you know, matching fund kinds of checks. So we don't know who we're thanking, or you know, we'll do that generically in a newsletter, but yeah, so that's kind of how we manage that.
So where you do have a known donor, and obviously people donate books and you never know who donated all of those books, but if you do have another known donor, and who's the corresponding secretary?
That's me.
Someone.
Yeah, so they'll get a letter thanking them.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you maintain a database of of donors, or is it just sort of your friends' membership that you mainly correspond with?
So I normally get told by someone else that such and such made a donation, please send them a letter. The woman that had been maintaining that database recently left the Friends. So I'm not sure who is maintaining that database. Larry, is that you right now?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, I was going to say,
we're in this giant lull, so I will blame the pandemic for my not jumping on top of that. But yeah,
and I can say that will be a topic on our agenda for our January meeting, because we have a massive database of people who are volunteers, kind of volunteers at the shop and scanning, and members, and I guess the donors, need to go on there too. So yeah, managing that would be extra hours that one of our board members has to keep up. We don't want it to fall down, because it's really good to keep track of who's joining and whose membership is expired, that kind of thing.
And one of the other ways that we fundraise is on Facebook, and we did a Giving Tuesday fundraiser, and every time someone donated, I was sure to thank them right away, as the Friends.
Just off on the Facebook topic, one important thing that a 501c3 can do is that they can add the donation button onto their Facebook page. So we can fundraise too at the library, and we do. Like the year-end appeal letter is actually through the library; it's not through the Friends. But we talked about adding that, and then we realized we couldn't. You have to prove your 501c3 status. So that's a really helpful option to have. I think a lot of people donate that way nowadays.
And I actually did add it on Giving Tuesday, and one person did donate via that button. I've added it on previous posts, and people generally ignore it. But we had money come in through the actual fundraiser, but then somebody actually donated through that button that I put on a separate post. So I may start doing that more and more.
Looks like Dawn has a question.
So the donations and the donors are really important, but as well as the volunteers. So how do you recognize the volunteers?
Well, I know for the last 3 or 4 years, we've had an annual, little function at the library, bring in some food, just make it a kind of a social recognition of the activities that people have volunteered for. It's a hard thing, because the very nature of volunteering, I'm sure it's the same with the animal shelter folks, is, I don't have any set time that I go in. I mean, it's kind of based on what's my work schedule or what's going on with my week. And so I don't necessarily see the same people, or maybe I don't go in this week, or maybe next week I'll go in twice a week or whatever. And it's kind of that way for everybody. And different people do this thing, and then some people do that thing. So we're not going to, cross paths necessarily. So it's a hard thing to kind of in person recognize people, because a lot of times we just don't see them. So we do try to obviously do this yearly thing, or I guess we started trying to do it as a quarterly, or Mitzi, did we do it?
I think
we decided that was maybe too much, but
okay. I think that we have last couple of years gone to once a year, and it's been kind of, we've called it a tea or something, and then we decided, well, no, it's not like macho enough. Guys aren't going to come to tea. I don't know. So I don't know what we called it last time, but we actually during the year might get donations of things, not books, that are kind of cool, but we don't know what to do with. So we've had one of these kind of raffles. We give every volunteer that comes a certain number of tickets, and then they put it in each of the gifts, and then we pull that. So really all the volunteers that are there usually go home with something. I think, Emily, didn't we combine and invite the library volunteers who kind of operate separately to the volunteer event that we did? I think it was more of kind of a joint thing, and we actually had the best turnout that we've had.
Yeah, it was a very nice event. Too, you had the Joyce Meyerly Award as well.
That award was started, I guess about 10 years ago. Joyce Meyerly was the president previous to me, and she was someone who, if she had been paid for the hours she worked, probably would have been a multimillionaire. She ran the book sale. She called all the volunteers to set up the times for people to come in for the shop, for the book sale. She did a lot of things. And so we decided to name an award after her that kind of recognizes a volunteer or two for that year that had really done something really dynamic. And every year we've asked people, whether that be through the newsletter or through board meetings or whatever, to nominate people. And then we have a little committee that's together and looks over the credentials of that person. Most of the time we know who the person is because they've been volunteering. But occasionally you get somebody who, as Larry is saying, has shown up the third Tuesday of every month for the last 10 years to do the shop. They're faithful. That's their time, and they know it. And those are the kind of people that sometimes, unfortunately, don't get recognized because they're doing the same thing week after week, month after month. So we try to do something and also when we have our teas, we try to bring in books and allow people to kind of look at them and kind of get an idea of what the books are that are in the library. We also have a fairly good, although this is through the library, a fairly good donation program where if you donate money to the library in someone's name, that they will then buy books for the library in that person's name, and then they're displayed in the case of the librarian, and the family or whoever can come and, take them out for a certain amount of time. So, that's another way that we try to recognize our staff, our volunteers, people that want to do something nice for us. So
the Meyerly,
I do.
Okay.
Pardon me?
The Meyerly Award actually is presented. We've done it a couple different ways. The award is actually, the person's name is added to a plaque that we have that's hanging in the Friends Auditorium, as a recognition to those people. So we add to the plaque every year.
I do want to say, I get up at, I'm probably not the only one, I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I'm giving COVID shots. So I really, really, have to be on, as they say. So if there's anything else that I answer, I know the people that are sitting there, the people that are sitting there are probably more than able to answer the questions that, that you have, but I just wanted to kind of leave it as I'm not just dropping off the face of the earth here. So,
well, Margaret, thank you so much for your time, not only on the Friends Board, but the time you gave us, and the time you're giving to the public health. So thank you. Can't thank you enough.
Yes, thanks for doing those shots, Margaret.
Another thing
I get a lot of people who are very happy. I've done 3 months of flu shots, and I've done 2 months of COVID testing, sticking a swab up somebody's nose, who probably will never want to see my face again, although they don't see much of my face because I have a mask on and I have glasses, covered glasses, and then I have a shield in front of me and I'm in a gown. And so they probably, because my name tag is kind of hidden, they probably don't know who I am. So if they saw me on the street, they probably would not know that I was the one that had tortured them. But again, it's all part of, all part of my job. I work for Henry Ford, so all part of the job. So anyway, if anything else, the other members that, like I say, that are there certainly can answer them. I do want to just mention that Joan Kelsch joined the conversation. She is one of the members, I believe, who has been awarded the Joyce Meyerly Award. So was very active with us. So again, if there's anything else like I say, the four board members that are there can certainly, answer them, and Emily knows more than most of us, so.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate it. And actually, Margaret,
You're
saying
welcome.
that, my question to the fellow animal shelter committees and our standard guests was there any other questions we wanted to ask? Because I kind of have two like wrap up questions, so I wanted to kind of check in to see if there's anything we didn't cover.
I don't know if we hit on this, but is there any specifically cons to operating independently 501c3? Are there any things that you guys would recommend, say like, hey, this is a pitfall, this is where we struggle? Is there anything you can maybe share on that you haven't already?
Do you mean, Drew, as far as obtaining the 501c3? Is that what you're saying, or what?
Not obtaining the 501c3 as much, but more rather operating as a 501c3. I know you guys have been doing it for a long time, but my question really comes to, like, if we ended up going that route and shifting that operational direction to a 501c3, is there any is there any challenges or recommendations that you guys would suggest, pitfalls to avoid essentially, or cons with operating in the way that you guys do?
Go ahead, Emily.
And the others can speak to this better than me because I don't fill it out or anything. But one thing I commonly read, because some libraries can actually get a 501c3 status, and what the only con that is usually listed is the paperwork that you have to fill out yearly. So Larry and Mitzi, do you have any issues with that?
I fill out, I don't even know if it's a 501c3 thing that I fill out, though. There's an annual,
It's
it's more with the state. I forget what it is.
I will say from my experience when I was treasurer, if you keep good records, filling those forms out is a breeze.
Oh yeah,
it really is. It's really copy and paste into the document that you have to fill in.
Yeah, I can't. And,
The tough thing about the 501c3 is getting it. I think I sent some information to you already, but you've got to have a board of directors. You've got to have a plan for what you're going to do. You have to have rules, and you have to have, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Who are your officers? How long are they going to serve? What are those officers going to do? That nobody is compensated for their financially compensated for being on your board. What are you going to do if you have money left over at the end and you dissolve? Where does that money go? So there's a lot of different legal things that you have to fill out. Once you get it, as John has said, as long as you keep up your paperwork and continue to do what I ask you to do, it's really a very simple, I guess I would say, simple process. So it's just a long time to get it. I think it took us almost 3 years to get it. So,
as far as the functional day-to-day operation, as a 501c3 excuse me, versus when we weren't. I mean, it's been a long time, but I mean, I've been on the board long enough. I don't have a sense that things have changed on a day-to-day basis. I mean, my kids were a lot younger, so I wasn't as involved as I am now. So maybe I'm not as good to comment on it, but I don't get the sense that we have changed the way we, do book sales or do this or do that on a kind of on an ongoing basis as a 501c3. It's more of a, legal kind of thing and the ability to take grants and that sort of thing.
So one of the things that I think makes it really easy is one of the things you have to have is a very clear mission and why you exist. And I think Margaret alluded to this a little bit. Once you have that, it's easy because you just stick to that. And then once we did the memorandum of understanding, that made it even more clear what we can and can't do. So again, that made it even easier for us to, now it's easy for me to say I'm not the treasurer anymore, Larry. So, but it makes the day-to-day go that much more easily. So there really are a lot of benefits without a lot of perils and pitfalls, I think. of being a 501c3. Now, my time on the board we've always been a 501c3, so I don't really know any better with any other nonprofits or anything like that. But the notion that you can get grants and things like that is pretty big, because you can get a lot of funding. You can join, you know, things like Kroger, you can, and Amazon, you can get them to give you money. Things like that add up quickly, or they can add up quickly.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry I was late. I got involved in trying to order something on the computer, and I got into a huge mess trying to order this thing, and I didn't realize what time it was.
It's okay. We're glad you're here.
Actually, my son is the one who did the paperwork for our 501c3. He's a lawyer, and he worked with Carol Windorf, was the library director, I believe, when we got the 501c3. I'm going to tell you a funny story about getting it. The paperwork went in, and we didn't hear, and we didn't hear, and we didn't hear. And my son had worked in Washington for a congressman, and so he kind of knew his way around Washington, and he knew, you know, kind of knew what he was doing. But at any rate, one night I was listening to Channel 7, the news, and there used to be a woman on there called Ruth to the Rescue. And you would call Ruth to the rescue and ask her to solve your problems. So one night I was listening to Ruth to the Rescue, and somebody called in with a question, and she said her answer to them was, contact your congressman. They'll do this for you. And so I thought to myself, contact my congressman. So at the time, our congressman was, I think it was Papa George. Yes. That's who it was. At any rate, I called their office. In 2 days, we had our 501c3. In 2 days. It took 2 days once he got onto it. And otherwise, your paperwork can sit there forever. And but if you get a congressman to work with you and make sure that the right person gets it, it goes fast.
That's so valuable. Thank you for sharing.
So I have the file that David submitted. If you want to look at it and see how to fill it out and all that sort of thing, it's here in a big brown, you know, kind of a legal looking folio, and you're welcome to take a look at all the paperwork and what they filled out. So,
truthfully, we'll let you know. We're still in the exploratory phase as to what we're trying to do, what our next steps are. So we appreciate it, and that story is super, super helpful. So thank you. And it actually kind of dipped into my closing question, which is, you know, if our group decides to seek out this model, are there any kind of things that we didn't cover yet, recommendations? You know, I mean, you all have done it. Can we learn from your mistakes? Something like that. So is there any, you know, tips for success that we should know?
My tip is to follow, you know, the library, prior to my son filling out all this stuff, the library board had actually filled out an application several, maybe at least 5 to 10 years prior to David doing this. And they just sort of, I'm going to say it just sort of sat there, I think, in Washington somewhere, lost in the governmental bureaucracy limbo. And I think once you file, you really have to stay on the case. I think that's what Ruth to the Rescue did for us, was getting somebody to stay on the case. And you just can't assume that the government offices are going to pass your stuff along the way it should be.
Sure. Shar, it looks like you have a question.
Well, no, I was just going to say things have changed in the past 25 years. It is easier now and faster to get your initial letter from the IRS. The Royal Oak Civic Foundation found that we got a very quick response on that. So I think we'll have better luck.
Good.
I do want to mention that if you want to make sure that your organization is acknowledged, is to get involved in things like, when they have the clay glass and whatever metal show, that you have a booth there. For example, we had a booth and we were doing little plastic mold things with the kids, okay? When there's an event at the farmer's market, we go there to promote the Friends and to promote the library. So again, you get your name out in front of people. And, I think there's a lot of people, including myself, who before I joined the board, didn't realize that, these programs were just, well, gosh, we go to a program. Isn't this nice? But I didn't know that there was a $250 fee that somebody was paying for that, magician to come in or whatever. And all the supplies that were needed for those events. So I think sometimes if you just get yourself out there, even when we had our smaller shop, and even now, I'll say to people, well, have you been to the Friend Shop? Friend Shop? What's the Friend Shop? Where is it? Well, it's pretty obvious now, but we used to be a little corner by the elevator. But even now, people say, well, you sell books? Well, yeah, we do. And they're like 50 cents and $1. Well, yeah, what kind of books are they? Well, they're pretty good books. And as a member of the Friends, I can tell you that we probably buy as much as anybody else does. So again, I think you need to get yourself out there and get people to realize what, again, as John has said, what is your mission? What are you trying to do? And how are you going to do it? So that I will close and say thank you very much. Go ahead, John. I can see your mouth.
I mean, you definitely have the advantage that we have, that people like you inherently. I think that goes a long way for a nonprofit organization. It sounds kind of obvious, but you'd be amazed at what a difference it can make.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you. All right. So my fellow Animal Shelter Committee members, are there any other questions for our guests? Okay.
No, none from me. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. This was
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
very
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you for
I have
having
to just say one more thing. I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to Deputy Chief Frazier, because about 20 years when I had moved to Royal Oak and joined the Crime Prevention Commission, at that point he was Officer Frazier and was the advisor to the group, and he had some little kids, I think, running around. So just wanted to congratulate you on your steady rise in the department, and thank you for starting me out on this path of volunteerism. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Mitzi, and I still got little kids running around.
Okay.
Thanks, though.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
Glad we could help. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you're welcome to stay, but if you don't, we understand. So whatever you need to do. So, but we are going to go ahead and move on with our meeting. Unless.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Unless, I don't know if this is like allowed, but I don't know if anyone needs a break. I'm okay, but I don't want to force us through if anyone needs to take a 5-minute breather. No? Okay, I'm going to take your silence as we're ready to go. Cool. So, well, that was fun. So next up on our agenda is moving over to public comment. And I'm not the Zoom expert, but it looks like there's 3 folks in our public comment. So
there are 3 attendees, and if any of you would like to make public comment, please raise your virtual hand. If you are on a phone, you will need to hit *9 to raise your virtual hand, and we can allow you to talk then. Well, I am not seeing that. So I'm going to assume that they are just here to observe your meeting and let you go on to your next agenda item.
Thanks, Carol.
Yeah.
Before we do, I saw Ashley put in the comments that she was having some trouble with her audio. So just a real quick check-in. Ashley, do you want to do like a test if we can hear you or not?
She might want to call in as well. Before I leave, I'll forward her that email.
Thank you. Thanks, Carol. All right, so our next agenda item is approval of the November 19th, 2020 minutes. So I want to confirm that everybody received the minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So is there a motion to approve? Travis?
I move for approval of the minutes for November 19th, 2020.
A second? Excellent. So what we learned last time, we have to go around and vote. Oh, go ahead, Dawn.
Sorry, I'm trying to catch all these things up. Who seconded?
Oh, Drew.
Yeah, you
Okay.
put me down for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think we have to go like all in favor. So I'll go around the boxes. Travis?
Yes.
Dawn?
Yes.
Shar?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Excellent. Passes. Next up is approval of the December 17th, 2020 agenda. Is there a motion?
Will we, will we eliminate volunteer recognition since Eileen isn't with us?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so I'll move approval of the agenda minus 8E.
Thank you. Is there a second? Travis?
Yes.
Don Travis seconded it. Okay. So vote, Travis?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Shar?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
And me, yes. Okay. Passes with eliminating item 8E from the agenda. All right, moving into staff report. So first up is the shelter report. Jody.
Hi, all. How are you? That was enlightening.
Yes,
Can you
it
hear me?
was. Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, yeah, and I apologize because I thought I had my camera working today, and then no, it worked great in trial, and then when I started the meeting, it did not. Yes.
I saw you when I first joined. It was working.
Flickering and stuff, and it was sort of yellow, and it's like, it's coming. No, it isn't. So anyway, here I am sitting in my drafty garret, ready to give my shelter report. Alrighty, I just emailed it to you guys as well so that you would be able to look at the report. Hang on, it's a little small if I can bring it up.
Okay.
Yeah, at the end of the month, basically what we're at is 6 dogs with 2 of them in foster, I believe 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 of them in foster. We're at 15. We were at 15 cats. We still have the in and out of that hoarding situation that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, it's moving slower than I think our ACO would like, but because of the status of the house, protective clothing has to be used. So he's got 1 set of protective clothing. He's doing it basically himself and is plugging right along. We've been able to place between the county shelter and some rescue groups, I think we've placed, I want to say close to 40 of the cats. It may even be more. I'd have to go back and double check numbers. But and I will stress again, we have been extremely fortunate in this situation because a lot of times when you get hoarding cats, they're sick. They've got all kinds of parasites that they're bringing in. These cats, the owner obviously cared about them, kept them fed, although they hadn't been vetted and they were still intact. Overall, they were in good health. They were more socialized than a lot of hoarding cats are. So although they don't seek out human attention, they don't run and hide as badly as a lot do. So in a perfect world, we are about as close to perfect with this hoarding situation, I think, as we can be. And fortunately, I think because of the season, and DC can talk to this more if we need to, because of the season, we've been able to kind of take our time. It's not too hot, so we're not having issues with the property, and we're able to get the cats out of there safely, make sure they're all out, and then proceed with the property with whatever needs to happen with that. So that's about it. Yeah.
One of the things I just mentioned about that is it sounds funny, but we had the advantage of using the house as an extension to the shelter.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because there was so many cats and we were having many issues finding spots for the cats. We left them in place, and our animal control officer went over there. The homeowner told him where the key was, and he went over there and fed them on a regular basis and cleaned up after them here and there as much as he could. So it wasn't an ideal situation, but it's worked out thus far, and it's pretty much come to an end at this point. So
yeah.
Sorry, I lost audio. I didn't catch that. How many, and apparently I'm Margaret now. All right. Well, I'm not, but anyway.
And you already have the answer.
There you go.
How many dogs were in the shelter? I didn't catch that.
Dogs were at 6, with some of them in foster, but those are the ones who are still on the books for us right now. We have at this point 4 in the shelter.
Okay. There's two,
yeah.
two and okay, that's
2 and 2. One of them who came in, I want to say just last week, so he wouldn't be reflected on this report. Wait a minute, this is December. He may have come in still in November. I can't remember. I've got to go back and double check that paperwork. But the one who came in, and he had some injuries, he had been out for a while, and during his vet visit, he was also found to be heartworm positive. So he will be with us for a little longer, most likely, unless we find a foster who's willing to take him. He is a lovely dog, very sweet, very affectionate. So I do have a couple of fosters who've taken heartworm positive dogs from us before. I will reach out to them, but I'd like to get it set up. I think he's going back to see the vet next week. So I want to make sure that we know what his treatment schedule is before we get him into a foster, because they may have to do some of the transport. So no big deal. We've got room right now. The animals that we have in are very manageable. So no stressors, no stressors.
Go ahead, Jody.
Yeah.
Jody,
Yes.
real quick, how are you handling people who would like to adopt an animal? I'm asked that question. I have no answer.
Yeah, well, it's easy enough. We're asking people to reach out to us personally, directly. We'll get the messages either through email or on our Facebook page or over the phone. We will direct them to our Adopt a Pet page, which lists our adoptable animals. If they're looking for something specifically, because we do have a couple that still aren't listed because either they haven't been vetted or we're dealing with some kind of a health issue or something. So we don't want to put them out as adoptable until we know we can place them.
Okay.
But we're dealing with people one-on-one based upon what they want. And in all honesty, because I know rescues and shelters are overburdened, we've been incredibly fortunate. We've been able to find rescues. We've been able to find fosters. We've been able to, because so many people have been working from home, return animals when they get out. So we don't have the surplus population that I'm sorry, that was my Christmas Carol comment right there. We haven't had to decrease the surplus population like a lot of rescues and shelters have. So if we don't have what they're looking for, we are being a good community player and directing them to places that might. That's kind of the new approach in best practices, is don't be so proprietary with, only come to us. We need to get these animals into homes, and we are referring to other places refer to us. So, but yes, we're asking people to talk to us directly. And if we can't help them, we'll point them to somebody who has what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jody, one other question, because you mentioned about heartworm positive
yes.
dogs in particular. Are there, what's the protocol you guys are? Is that the only scenario when you guys don't post a dog on online or what?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like, for instance, the cats who've come in from this hoarding situation. What we are trying to do is to set them up with rescues, especially home-based rescues, where they can work on socializing the cats. Anytime you're with a rescue or one of the larger shelters, like one of the county shelters that have full-time staff and behaviorists, and they're much better prepared to do the day-to-day work with these animals to make them more adoptable. When we're getting a huge influx of cats in, we have to make appointments to get them all in to see the vet to make sure that they don't have something contagious, because we don't want to place them in a foster home with another pet where they might be taking something in and causing a problem for the family. The bigger shelters have vets on staff, so they can do that immediately. So it does sometimes take us a while. And with all of these cats, that is definitely putting, a wrench in the works. But like I said, we've been fortunate. We've been able to find rescues and shelters who have been able to take them piecemeal, 6 or 8, 10, 12 at a time, to actually start that process with them. So we're dealing with the final group of them. If we cannot get them placed, then we will move in rescues or shelters. Then we will move forward with getting them vetted and working on the socialization and reaching out for people to take them home.
Okay.
There are a few reasons. Mostly we're talking, in our case, medical, because we do need to make sure that they are healthy enough to go into a home before we place them.
Okay. Yeah. No, I was just curious because I saw Mitchell, who's extremely cute, on the adoption page, but I didn't see any other dogs.
No, Mitchell's one of those, and I've mentioned this before. We have almost always have at least one dog who is just a particular taste, or he's got some issues that not everybody is willing to deal with. With Mitchell, we had him in a foster situation. He was doing great with the family, but there were dogs next door and a 4-foot fence, and he kept trying to climb it. So we had to pull him out of there because that was putting everybody in a dangerous situation.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing now that he can climb a 4-foot fence, we would be ridiculous to try to place him into another foster situation with a 4-foot fence and other dogs. And because there are so many dogs in need of it right now, we have just cautiously backed up with Mitchell so that we can be really honest with people, let them know what they're getting into. And the perfect person will come along. They always do. He is one of our heartworm dogs who is now healthy. He finished his treatment. He's doing great. And he has adapted so well to the shelter. He gives us no issues whatsoever. So, he's got the day-to-day with staff, which, by the way, shout out to the staff. I see Katie's on. Shout out to my staff. I really have the best staff. They have been so amazing through this whole thing. And we've got some really happy, well-adjusted animals.
Awesome.
Don't know if I answered your question, Drew, because I prattled. I'm sorry. I was listening to Margaret. I had to just pick up and keep talking.
Is there any other questions for Jody? No? Okay. Thanks for your great work, Jody and staff.
Thank you so much.
Next up is the financial report with DC Frazier.
Hi. I have the same problem again. I had planned to do this from work and stay at work, and I had to run home, and I wasn't able to go back in time, so I'm at my house still. So I don't have it, but I will email it to Dawn. She can send it out into the minutes.
Thanks, DC.
Sorry.
Hey, it's 2020. Life happens. All right. So we will be moving on to, well, unless there's any, if there's any questions on that. Okay. Moving to unfinished business. First up is the draft ordinance. Okay. So recap, last month we viewed, reviewed, and chatted about it. Now we just had a lively conversation with a potential, it's been a night filled with fuzzy friends. Now we've heard from, our colleagues at another city department and another fundraising group, how they work. you know, in my opinion, I see this on the agenda as a placeholder for discussion, maybe not necessarily decision making right now. I mean, maybe we can get there, but what are your thoughts? Go ahead, Travis.
I think it could work. I think with maybe a different structure, and it sounds like, you know, they have a wider membership and then a smaller board, and all of their members, I think I've heard them mention it a couple of times, they pay dues, which I think would be, you know, something beneficial to the whole makeup of that too. So I think if it was structured in the same way, that there was a wide membership and a more narrow board kind of running everything, and that everybody paid dues, you know, I think that's kind of a fundraising thing in itself. So I think that that model could work.
So I personally kind of honed in on, and we didn't really spend much time talking about it, but a huge difference that was apparent to me was the actual library board. So when Emily described, there's kind of two ways libraries can do it, right? So it sounds like libraries can do it the way we're doing it right now at the shelter, right? That there's like an advisory committee, and then the commission, the city commission, has actual oversight. The Royal Oak Library, in fact, has its own, I don't know what it's called, board. I'm just going to call it the board that is different than an advisory board. So it's in a more of an official capacity. And if I understand it correctly, no oversight from the commission. Is that true, Shar? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, that's true. We appoint the board, and the staff report to us. So, you know, so the staff report to their board and then to us in kind of a hybrid way, but it seems to work.
Okay.
Yeah, Emily is at all our staff meetings, our senior staff meetings through the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'm saying this right, but technically she doesn't answer to the city manager like the rest of us at the city staff meetings does. So if the city manager was to say, give her an order about something, she's in a different position than say myself or department heads or deputy department heads, because she answers to the board, we answer to the city manager.
And I mean, honestly, to keep this conversation realistic, that I don't see us having the capacity to implement that sort of structure, right? I mean, it's already pretty clear the way that, you know, Jody reports to DC reports to the chief, and the chief report, you know what I mean? That structure is already in place. But I did want to point out that that is a huge difference, right? That the structure. So I don't know if that's something we would need to take into consideration if we're thinking of some sort of friends path, but I did want to make sure that was on our minds. Go ahead, Travis.
No, and I've been thinking about that. Like, I'm not sure that it would really even matter at this point. I mean, if the city commission is funding the budget of the animal shelter, and they provide the direction through the city manager on down the chain, then I'm not sure that our function is completely necessary in that whole chain, other than maybe just giving comments to the city commission on things that, you know, we think about the animal shelter, but we could do that as a city resident anyways. So my thoughts are, you know, we don't necessarily even need a board to even have a friends board too, because that could be something completely different and separate from the management and oversight structure of the animal shelter. So to me, I don't, you know, not to diminish anything that we do here, but if there's going to be a friends board focused on fundraising, then this particular board, the way that we're structured, would be redundant in multiple ways.
I agree. And Travis, when you were saying that, I was thinking, again, hypothetically, if a Friends board was set up, a Friends of the Shelter board was set up. I mean, I could see that organization having an MOU with the city. That's the thing. I don't even know what that entity would be. Like, I could see potentially how that arrangement could maybe happen. Obviously, I don't work for the city or anything, or I'm not a commissioner, so I can't approve or disapprove anything. But, you know, in thinking about how it works, I could kind of see how that works. But I agree, Travis, it does. It feels redundant. And again, I don't, like Travis, I don't want to discount any of the work that we've been doing. But I definitely wouldn't want to compete. Go ahead, Travis. And then Don.
Okay, my thoughts on that is, you know, probably a similar structure where they go through, I'm sorry, was it Emily, right? The library director, Emily.
Yep.
You know, I think that the Friends of the Animal Shelter could either go through Jody or even DC or somebody. You know, the request could ultimately come from them, like, you know, hey, we're looking to get a new roof, or hey, we have this big expense, or we want to do this kind of a software, or we want to do something. Can the Friends fund that? And I think, you know, that having Jody and DC in their positions, they're the ones that could make that request to any kind of a Friends board. So I'm not sure what kind of contractual thing would be needed there. You know, that's probably somebody else's call, but that's how I could see it working.
So Jody, I saw a hand go up. Are you
Yeah.
wanting to respond to Travis, or should Don go first?
Don can go first. I just,
Okay.
I think I can respond to both.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Don.
so I guess my question would be, at what point in time, and maybe I should have asked the Friends of the Library this, but when would we be seen as valuable? Because if you look at the dollars that we have raised this year, and not even counting COVID in there, and even in previous years, it was not significant. And it really wasn't moving the mark for anything that would make the animal shelter progress. So I guess we would have to really unwind everything what we're doing, and then rewind and restructure from ground up if we become a fundraising effort.
So go ahead, Jody, and then I'd like to claim my spot in line after Jody.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. So, and I guess I'm glad that Dawn asked that question, because one of the things, Sarah and I have been talking, because that's what her master's is in, nonprofit management. So I bounce these off her a lot. And, you know, one of the things that might work in this situation would be a Friends of that's more structured, where it is we set the budget for, this is what we'd like to raise this year, as opposed to being piecemeal. And to take nothing away from what the Friends of the Library does, it sounds like they maybe are they have a couple of ongoing ones, but it's mostly smaller fundraising attempts, and then a couple of community events that they'll attend. But it could, with a 501c3, there could always be reaching out to people for sponsorships, going for grants that right now we do have to take them through the Civic Foundation, or, you know, what used to be Roots. So I do think that it could be Friends, but sort of Friends with benefits, where you would, yeah, throwing it out there.
I like that.
Thanks. Sort of, yeah, Friends on steroids, where there is more of a board direction of, here's what we'd like to accomplish. You get together and you set goals and tasks at the beginning of the year. We'd like to raise $20,000 this year so that we could do a roof, or we could do new computer equipment, or we could do, you know, peepholes for the cat room or whatever. And then you've got the focus, and whatever you do to raise the funds, you're channeling it toward a larger goal.
So the reason I wanted to hop in line is because I thought it might be worth talking about, basically, what do we have as an asset as the committee stands right now in terms of fundraising ability, and what don't we have that the freedom of our own 501c3 would allow us. So, I think, Dawn and I did the dog walk last spring or summer, fall, I don't know, sometime in 2019. And then, we worked with a group of community volunteers to try to get the furball off the ground. I mean, it would have happened if COVID didn't. And I'm not going to lie, in some ways it was tough, right? Not that because of some of the constraints around being a government committee with, and I'm not saying I'm against the Open Meetings Act, but that in place does make it difficult to meet because there's rules. We can't have too many committee members on on this like auxiliary committee that we had off to the side, things like that. So that in and of itself was kind of difficult. But something that has been helpful was now that we have an established relationship with the city, we were able to do the Eventbrite. Now I'm thinking about how much, Carol, who's helping us here tonight, is working right now. And, I know DC has all the regular stuff he has to do. So I know it did, setting that up did pull folks away from the stuff that they do 9 to 5 regularly. But it was helpful for us that we didn't incur any extra costs because of that, because the city already has that set up. Same with marketing. Again, Judy Davids is busy, but when she can squeeze us in, we've received some very beautifully marketed, City of Royal Oak branded stuff, to help kind of amplify our efforts. So I think there's been some definite pros. Obviously there's difficulties as well. But, based on, that's why I specifically asked the Friends, like, what support do you get from the city? And, they're pretty much their own thing with the, they're able to use some space in the library and make copies from time to time, which I don't want to discount that. That is helpful. But I think there's some pieces that we've been able to leverage. That granted, once a 501c3 is established, we could hypothetically set up our own, Eventbrite and stuff like that. That's all doable. But for right now, what we've had to work with, it's actually worked out pretty well. I guess I just want to be mindful that things like that could be lost. Travis and then sorry, I saw Margaret. Travis and Ashley, excuse me.
Ashley can go first.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. So, looking at the nonprofit aspect, I don't think we are going to be able to get any real funding and do any big events where we're getting these large donations unless we have that aspect. So I don't know if one workaround to that would be if we do create this Friends entity, maybe we could do joint events through like a memorandum of understanding with the actual animal shelter itself, working through Jody, working up the chain through the animal shelter. And by having joint events that are the animal shelter plus the Friends of the animal shelter, maybe we could still use some of the city benefits like the Eventbrite or whatever by having a joint event set up. But I just don't see how we will really be functional as a fundraising entity unless we have the benefit of, being able to offer tax exempt status for donations.
Can I add on to that, Travis, before it goes to you? I also want to add the grant aspect. So, we do have the Royal Oak Civic Foundation now with their 501c3 status, and the city does have a grant writer, but, I don't know how many entities would be interested in making a grant and then using the Civic Foundation like as a pass through. And I really mean that as I don't know. I'm not like saying that snidely. That is something that would need to be considered, and it would probably help if we better understood what the goals of the Royal Oaks Civic Foundation were as well. But I think, being a standalone 501c3, that's typically a requirement for, foundation funding and things like that.
Quick
so
thing,
Travis first and then Drew.
Okay. You guys have mentioned two of my points, which was the grants and then the larger donations. But I also just wanted to mention that, when it comes to things like Eventbrite and even, posting on some of the city social media and stuff like that, I would highly doubt that they would turn down the Friends board and say no, because, raising money for the shelter also benefits the city as a whole. And, even in our last meeting, Shar had mentioned that, even though the animal shelter is funded now by the city commission, they still want us to raise money. So if that's one avenue we need to raise money or do an event or something like that, I don't see that we would get turned down. Just because the Friends of the Library doesn't do it or doesn't need it doesn't mean that we couldn't. So I guess that was just my point on that.
That's true. Maybe they haven't asked. You're right. You're right. And then we did reveal through the conversation, they were established 20 years ago. So they've been doing longer than that even. They've been doing their thing for that amount of time. And think about how marketing and Facebook and all that stuff has changed. So you're right. They may have just did it on their own instead of asking. So Drew, you were next, and then Shar,
Yeah.
I saw your hand go up.
So the 501c3 and the Civic Foundation, I mean, I guess the question that I have is kind of going back to, I think what you mentioned, Liz, is are we actually going to be able to get any benefit out of those grant writing capabilities? Would be my first question. So I don't know if we need to have an ongoing dialogue with them, but I think what I'd have to ask Shar would be, and I think Liz, you're on mute, but my question for Shar and the commissioners would be, what is the vision in terms of how much is the city going to fund the animal shelter 5-10 years down the road? Do we have a forecast that says the city's going to fund 80% of the animal shelter budget, and the expectation is that we let's just say we're still a city entity, a city committee would be then responsible for funding the remaining 20%? If it's vice versa, where the expectation is, for example, the city's only chipping in 20%, 5-10 years down the road, and we're covering 80%, then I think there needs to be a discussion about, does it make sense that the animal shelter is a city entity itself? I think really we need to have a discussion to pair what is the city's commitment financially for the next long term for the animal shelter, to then really say how we best fit to serve the animal shelter. I don't know. That's kind of my perspective.
Shar, you did not unmute. You made a good effort, but it didn't work. Uh-oh. Let me see if I can unmute you. I can ask to unmute. Carol, can we get some help with unmuting Shar?
Let me see something here.
I was going to say, I hear you, DC. Let me see if I can do this here.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Oh, great. Welcome back.
I forget I have a touch screen on this device. Okay. Yes. Okay. So 3 things. One, just because one foundation didn't want to give a shelter related grant through the Civic Foundation doesn't mean others will feel the same way. So that path still may be open. 2, we need to know what the bare bones budget is for the animal shelter, and what it would do, what Jody would do if she had more money. So, at some point in we're going to see that in the city budgeting process. But I will still say that if push comes to shove and we run into the same economic conditions that caused us, 15, 20 years ago to threaten to close our own animal shelter, and that was what the impetus was for this committee, the animal shelter might be one of the easy things to pass off to Oakland County, since we already pay taxes to them to do that. So that's the long-term risk of it. And those are sort of my 3 thoughts.
And Drew, to answer kind of your question, I opened back up the minutes to try to reference back, but I'm pretty sure Shar said that the commissioners are funding the shelter, like it is funded.
Well, I'm not questioning that, but that's okay. This year. I'm talking about 5-10 years down the road. I think there needs to be a discussion about where the vision is for the animal shelter 5 years down the road, where we want to aspire to be when we grow up to be the best that we can be. Does that align to the city budget? And that's really the I think there's a gap there that needs to be, addressed.
Yeah, and hearing what you're saying though, I think it even is talking about what we're trying to figure out now. Because when you say we, that's assuming that us committee members actually have a say in that, when in fact it seems like it's been established that with the hiring of the manager, that's really what's in question with us. Like, are we really needing to be involved in the kind of the planning moving forward, or are we here to raise money? I mean, that's really, we're kind of having an identity crisis. So Jody's hand went up, and I see you, Dawn, but I think Jody's went up first. So can we go to Jody? Okay.
Yeah, just a quick one about long-term funding. I think one of the things we may want to think about right now too is, yes, we may get into that situation that we were in 15 years ago. We may easily get into that situation. However, there are a handful of shelters down in this area, this section of Oakland County, and we, at this point, I believe we have sympathetic leadership in Pontiac. And I know I've talked to them about how beneficial it could be to the county to have a presence in the South End with some of the smaller shelters banding together. So we are not taking community animals all the way to Pontiac and inconveniencing the more heavily populated South End of the county. So now may be the time that we talk to county about whether there's any funding coming from that avenue that could help the city, that a Friends of or some other type of support organization, everybody working hand in hand, we may be able to not only fund the basics, but go over and above and improve over the next several years so that we do become, and I don't know obviously where in 15 years, because I was around when it happened that everything rolled back, and I know the circumstances from the outside. Without oversight, it could very easily go back there. But I also think that continuing to try to instill best practices and industry standards and improve and work with the community, as opposed to just working for the good of the shelter. We're hoping to do a lot more education and outreach. I haven't told you this yet, DC, sorry. I'm hoping to direct things over the next few years to more education and outreach so that the community becomes a partner in the shelter. So like I said, now may be a good time to try to draw county into some of those conversations and see what they think.
And to, can I, if I may just add on?
Dawn's next. Dawn's next. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay,
Dawn.
so I guess my question is to Shar. Does the city not have plans for 2 or 3 years down the line, or when they do a budget, are they only looking at the next 12 months, for example? And I'm not speaking only for the animal shelter, but I'm looking at the large picture.
So the city has a $90 million general fund budget, $90 million general fund budget. And the animal shelter's annual budget is what, under $200,000?
About 135,000.
Yeah.
So in the grand scheme of things, is this something that the city commission at the end of the day is going to focus a lot of time and attention on?
Understand.
Probably not. I mean, there's the heartbeat thing of kitties and doggies, but money's money.
Well, that sort of wasn't my question.
Oh.
my question is, does the city basically have a plan that goes out not just 12 months, but past that? They do in general, don't they? They have
we budget 5 years. We project 5 years in advance.
That's the question.
And we assume that all of our income and expenses will change at the same pace over the course of the next 5 years. But that's a plan, not actual spending.
Right.
Can I just chime in really quick on that?
Go ahead.
Part of that 5-year budget plan has always been incorporating what the Royal Oak Animal Shelter can bring in as well. Mm-hmm. And so the budget a lot of times has revolved around past practices with donations and things like that and how much it's brought in. So a function of this committee for years has also been fundraising. But back when there was volunteers mainly running the shelter, a huge function of this committee was also running the shelter. And now we don't have volunteers running it anymore. I think that's where we're at now, is the structure of the shelter itself has changed. And should we consider changing the board as well as the structure has changed?
Right. Okay, Drew, go ahead.
The two comments. So it sounds like that in that 5-year plan, the question is it sounds like we're accounting for a constant level of funding by the city is my first comment. If my understanding is incorrect, please fill me in, because I don't know if we have enough historical records to say what we expect our fundraising target every year to be for the next 5 years. My second comment would be, I know Southfield, I was reading just now back in late 2019, reestablished their animal shelter and put a bunch of capital improvements into it. Do we have any contact with them, Jody or DC Frazier, in terms of how they're operating, or if maybe they have also an interest in merging with county?
I'll just jump in and try to answer. I don't have any contact with them. I seem to remember that they were working through a private rescue who
Yeah, the
was doing
private
their
rescue
animal
got
control
kicked out.
services. Yeah, and they got kicked out. So I'm not aware of what's happened since then. If the city stepped in, then I'm assuming they saw that there was a call for it. There was probably, like with us, probably a public outcry, because there are the heartbeats, the puppies and the kitties, and they, people like to have an animal shelter in their community, just like they like to have a library. So that is probably what happened in Southfield. Yeah, don't know for sure.
Yeah, I don't have any input as far as Southfield. I have never reached out to them. I know I've had talks over the last year with Madison Heights' shelter and Berkeley's. I've never reached as far as Southfield, mainly because last year they didn't even have a shelter per se that was city ran.
So,
really quick, I'm sorry, as far as like a fundraising budget, if you will, I know we talked about the budget of the animal shelter through the city, and that's to kind of keep the shelter running and keep the shelter moving. But any money above and beyond that would pay for extras, I guess, and some capital improvements and things that maybe would be considered frills, if you would. It would go towards the animals, towards the shelter itself and things like that. It definitely wouldn't go towards staff luxuries or
and that
payroll.
I can totally understand, but I think I really need to hear it from the city officials to say, like, hey, we're going to fully fund operationally the shelter, and the expectation is that the focus of our group hypothetically is all on capital and project expense to make the animal shelter better. If it was a clear statement on that regard, I think it would be a lot easier to make this decision.
So I actually have some historical knowledge, being on the committee. Historically, that's what's happened. The city hasn't, okay, maybe I don't have all the historical knowledge, but all I can say is that from the time I've been on the committee, it's been about 4 or 5 years now, every year we've been asked to raise $100,000, and every year we have not raised $100,000. We've barely even come close. So we have had that request from the city. The change now is that we have a commitment to funding right now from the city. Before, that commitment wasn't there, that it was like, if you don't raise this money now, we don't know what's going to happen next year. So that's been the message up until right now. So I hear you, Drew. I mean, it would be nice if we did have a goal. It sounds like we're not, I don't want to say we, it sounds like the city's not there yet based on what I'm hearing DC and Char say. I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with, the pandemic and everything else right now.
I do know in the last year, maybe a year and a half, this has came up at the city commission level, and the city commission has said, we're committed to keeping the animal shelter running and keeping it funded. And I know there's been direction from the city commission that they want the animal shelter committee to focus on fundraising. I do know that's came out of city commission meetings and staff meetings over the last year. Maybe not all at the same meeting, but that has been a direction that has came from the city commission of, I know the mayor talked at in length about it at one of the city commission meetings, that there is a commitment from the city to keep the animal shelter going, but that they'd like the committee to assist in raising more funds and helping on that end.
So Jody's had her hand up for a bit. Jody, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not a big deal, but historically, I think one of the issues that we have run into is going back to so many small communities going with county. They were able to undercut, and offer services at a much lower rate because they monopolized. That maybe doesn't help. But I do know, again, that the people who want their smaller shelters down here, we do a great service for a highly populated area, and people are what this is huge to them. This is in their heart. They want this here. There was somewhere I was going to go and I completely lost it. So I just was like, I'm trying to fill and I'm tap dancing, and everybody here knows I can't tap dance. So yeah, I don't remember. It'll come back to me.
So Char's next, and then Dawn.
Hey, Jody, question. So, I mean, ostensibly, the role of an animal shelter is to deal with lost and found animals. I mean, that's for a municipality, that's a primary role. To what extent do you do that work? That is, someone brings in a lost animal and you hold it for a period of time or check the microchip or whatever until an owner comes and picks it up.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a large portion of what we do, but it's an outmoded way of running a shelter these days, because, like I said, working with the community is the focus of the future. Figuring out how to work with community cats. Who do we microchip? How do we have low-cost vaccination clinics and spay and neuter clinics? Being a service, providing a service to the community, whether it is returning the lost animals or all of these other programs, that's where shelters are going. So shelters are becoming a part of, I guess I'll say community policing, but only because we are right under the, public safety police department at this point. We are becoming that part of the unarmed policing in the community. And a lot of outreach. We do a lot of things with education. At least that's where we should be going. So although we still do, we'll do a half dozen, sometimes 10 animals, 10 dogs a month that we have to return to their owners. We answer a lot of questions for people. We direct people, what do you do if? And that is probably the highest percentage of what we do. And we actually do, I feel, take that pressure off another department that doesn't work with animals. We know what we're talking about, so we know where to direct people, and we can talk to our contacts and have the resources lined up to help people with their animals. So did that help? Did that answer? Yeah, okay.
Dawn's next.
Okay, so my greatest concern out of this is we're trying to make these decisions whether we're going to go to this other format or maintain what we're doing. But in all of this, we had, if we go backwards in time, we started getting really interested in fundraising, and people were getting excited and coming up with new ideas. And now, thank you, COVID, everything's just sort of fell off the edge of the earth. And it's like we're back at square one again. And where's the excitement going to come from to start making that progress towards actually doing the fundraising that we were really frankly getting quite passionate about? And it was a pretty cool situation. I guess, we need to stop that gap now and look at what we can do for 2021. And the other portion of it, whether we break off and become friends of the Royal Oak Animal Shelter, or we maintain what we have and use it however we're continuing to use it. But we have to really be pretty, we need to make some decisions pretty quickly, is the point I want to make.
So Jody, I saw your hand go up. Do you want to respond to Dawn, or should you?
Yeah, I think so, because I do agree. COVID has been tough. I mean, we're still getting donations, but our costs are also down this year. So even though our donations are down, I think we're still doing okay within the budget. But that's focusing on the future. And I'm looking at you guys. I'm looking at all of you asked and tasked with raising $100,000 a year. And that's where I it's overwhelming. That's where I am kind of drawing back to what Drew asked earlier, with the city's commitment to what is a reasonable amount to run a shelter in this community, doing what we do now with maybe a few extras, because we have been pretty bare bones, just the way it's gone based on 15 years ago. Coming at it from 2 or 3 different angles, where we've got city funding, where we potentially have a Friends of Board with a 501c3 that can go out for grants and other gift programs. Being able to run educational programs in the community where, like All About Animals, they do TNR classes once a month. There's no reason we couldn't host online TNR classes where people pay $10. And after that, like All About Animals, you get your membership card and you can go out into the community and help to trap in TNR for a much lower rate. We can do classes with Eagle Scout troops where they learn to build shelters for community cats. We can work with vet schools and figure out how to bring low-cost stuff into the community. I do think that doesn't help with how to fund it, but I think at least if we're doing a multi-pronged approach of how do we bring this money in, the money for necessities, the money for those slight extras, and then what are our stretch goals if we really have the funds. Down the road, I'll bring it up again, this is the wrong time for it, but a millage may be the way to go for the shelter if we want to keep it in the community. You're talking at what it costs to run the shelter, a percentage of a mill. We're not even talking a whole mill. This is the wrong time because of COVID and everything else. But that may be a direction that we do want to keep open down the road, so that we can become a little gem of an animal shelter instead of a shelter that just does what we have to do to get by because people want us in the community. I would love nothing more, whether it's under my leadership or under somebody else's leadership, to be able to look at the Royal Oak Animal Shelter and say, oh my God, this is what a shelter should be. This is a community partner, and this is what we want in a town like Royal Oak. So.
Thanks, Jody. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add on to that, based on what you were saying, Jody, again, this goes back to that long-term 5-10 year vision of, do we need to have staff in the animal shelter, or a partnership with like a local vet or a veterinary school where we are able to offer these services to the community at a reduced cost or whatever it may be. That's exactly the kind of stuff I'm getting at, is that I don't see, if that's going to be a part of our operations, then it should be covered by the city. Like if we have to pay, let's just say hypothetically, we had to pay someone to be on our staff that supported, like a vet tech type person, that should be on the city. If it's not going to be on the city, then we need to start, I think it's either this is a city entity and it's a public service and we pay our tax dollars into this, or we go private nonprofit. Or the third option, I guess, is county level.
Yeah, can I just respond quickly?
Yeah.
Yep, go.
Yeah, I think that number one, I think it's important to be with the city. I feel personally, there are a lot of rescues, but when you're running as an independent, you obviously don't have the same rules and the same oversight. And I do think the oversight helps. But I do think that we could get to a point where we have some self-funding programs. That is going to take more staff time. Sorry about that, but it is. It's going to take more staff time. It's going to take some dedicated, knowledgeable volunteers helping out. And I think that it's going to take, some kind of you've got to have a vision for the shelter. As I've said, right now we maintain because it's what we're able to do. But I do think the shelter could become a draw. We could be like all the parks in town. Boy, look at this great shelter. We're having all these amazing events. We're one of those things people want to live in a town like this. But self-funding is one of those things that would help as well. Whether it's whatever, I can't remember what you mentioned, Drew, but that's what made me think of it.
You meant the county's been brought up a few times too, if I could just chime in. The county's not free.
No.
We would still pay into the county, and there's pros and cons, but I think one of the advantages of having a shelter in Royal Oak is it's a convenience and a service for the community that they all enjoy and take advantage of. If you were to go with the county and you lost your dog, you would have to drive up to 1200 Telegraph area during their business hours. And there are some inconveniences to it as well, but we don't necessarily reap some of the benefits of the county right now because we're not part of their group. But they still do help us out when we need it, just like with these cats. It took a few pleases and a little butt kissing, but I think they ended up taking about 20 of them for us.
Yeah, some high level pleases and butt kissing. It wasn't any, it was way above my pay grade.
I don't know if you saw me put chapstick on earlier, but
that's okay. That's all right. It worked. It worked. Yeah. So, I mean, county is kind of a blessing and a curse. We do pay our tax dollars and they do help us out, but, if I'm out of line, pull me back, please, DC. They do tend to get frustrated with us because we're not members. We haven't signed on. We don't have a contract with them. And so they give us a lot of grief, even with animals. We're not set up to quarantine dangerous dogs. Not a term I use lightly either, because I try to work with whatever we have, as does staff. But we are not set up. We cannot take an animal outside without going past a number of other animals, without going through another holding room. We just don't have the facility for that. That ought to be something, in my opinion, because we do pay our tax dollars, we ought to be able to turn to the next level up and say, help us, because we can't manage this. And often grudgingly, they will. Potentially, if we could get, the funding one way or another, we don't have to go back to that. We don't have to worry about what we're going to do in some of these cases. And unless it's really severe, we can handle most of these things ourselves. Right now, we can't. We're just not equipped, and we're not laid out for that.
And the county is not an endless resource. They don't have a facility that they can take endless animals. They're constantly full. When we met with the lady, last name Gray, Jody, didn't she say they had Shelly Gray, didn't she say they had over 100 and something pit bulls?
Yeah.
Right
well, and
now?
I will tell you, so there is a good thing, because I served on the task force, the best practices task force with county. And one of the only things we were able to accomplish through that was that we are having a shelter assessment done at county. And it is being done by somebody who's nationally recognized as following best practices and industry standards. So the report will come out. It will be presented to the commission and to the county exec. These are the changes that we recommend should be done at county immediately, because too many cats are being euthanized. There is not a community cat program. They are not dealing with specific breeds of dogs. You guys don't need to hear all of county's dirty laundry, but some of these things, hopefully within the next few months, will be addressed. And then we get to a point where the smaller shelters in the county can actually work in a collaborative way with them, and we open up the entire pipeline. So it's flowing both ways. Do you have cats and we don't? Then, you know, we can tell you what we can take, and we'll go back and forth. But it's a bit of a stutter step right now. It's not as smooth as it should be.
So I kind of want to circle. Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to do, Shar. So I wanted to circle back to what Dawn was saying, because I feel like Dawn was starting to kind of move us in some sort of direction. So, you know, we could talk about this all night, but I have a feeling that we don't want to. So we need to figure out what are the next steps. I don't know if it's tabling this, and, you know, maybe we all need to noodle on it until our next meeting, and maybe we can work together to think of some next steps. Go ahead, Shar.
Draft ordinance is just something that is floating out there in the ether. It has no power. It doesn't come from the city commission. It doesn't, I don't even know how much it comes from the city manager, and the city attorney who drafted it doesn't work here anymore. So, you know, if we had a parking lot on our agenda, I'd put it in the parking lot and leave it there until we feel like we want to deal with it.
So that's, may I go, Drew, and then you? My question, my pushback on that is I don't want to meet just to meet. So, you know, I don't want to spin my wheels. I don't want to talk about how many scoops of kitty litter go in the box. I need, as Liz, a committee member, I'm not speaking for the whole committee, I need direction. So I want to know what I'm showing up for every month and what the goals are, so I can, you know, put on the right hat and try to accomplish those goals. So I don't know if that question is going to the commission saying, what do you want us to do? Or if we're looking within ourselves to redefine ourselves. But I just don't think it makes sense just meeting just to meet like we always have been.
And I was gonna just to add on to that, I think if this thing's floating around in the ether, then what needs to happen, if that's really the direction the committee sees fit, or, you know, at the city level and city management, there needs to be a discussion, I think, before we go forward with it, between the police department, Jody, and the city commissioners and decide this is our 5 to 10 year plan for the animal shelter. If we're not involved and we're only supporting from a fundraising standpoint, I think we need to understand what the long-term strategy is for the animal shelter and figure out how we pair best with it. It can't be that, well, the committee, the animal shelter committee, is not responsible or accountable for any of the operations of the animal shelter, but they're going to be responsible for chartering the direction. Like, that doesn't really make sense to me. So the direction, if that's the case, needs to come from you guys, and then we assist.
Go ahead, DC.
Just really quickly to touch on the genesis of the letter from the city attorney, Dave Gillum, was from about a year ago. It was talked about how the ordinance and the bylaws are somewhat outdated and don't necessarily actively reflect on how the committee is running. So that's part of the genesis of why the ordinance was rewritten. I forgot my second thought now. Somebody just came in and said something to me. Sorry. Part of the second thought is, it's my understanding at one of the strategic planning meetings, that it was talked about that making this body a little bit more concentrated on fundraising. So that was a direction that was given in the last year too. So just kind of those things, but I agree. Like Commissioner Douglas said, this isn't something that's brought to us to say, hey, make a decision right now. It's just that was brought up in the last year. At some point, we do have to manage the fact that we have bylaws out there that are not even close to acting within, you know, agreement with the city ordinance, and the city ordinance is no longer 100% covering how this body is running, because now that we have, the ordinance was written before there was a city manager or a city employee operating the shelter and things like that. So but I know I wasn't at strategic planning meeting, but I'm going off what the chief told me, where he had made mention that right now the animal shelter, as far as with Jody there, is running fine management wise, but we're hurting financially. And that was when the city was saying the animal shelter committee raise as many funds as you can, and then we'll chip in the rest. Now the city has graciously and generously said, hey, well, we're going to cover this year and most likely next year. I'm not speaking for them, but this still doesn't take away from the fact that the city has a good shelter manager that's doing a great job, and but we still need some funding.
I think there needs to be a meeting internally with police, commissioner, the animal shelter team to really chart out and decide what the goal is to be in the next 5 to 10 years. If it's not our duty to do that, that's fine. But I think that will help answer the question for us very easily, how how our bylaws essentially should look. And it will tell us very clear as day how we should be structured. And then we can have this decided in the next month or two. I don't think this isn't difficult. I don't think the question would be very easy to answer if we knew where we wanted to be when we grew up. If we wrote down our goals and said, this is what I want to achieve in 5 years, it's basically just like, for example, at my work, we do development plans. I'm sure people are familiar with this, and it's writing down and saying, this is what I want to be, and here's the steps and actions I'm going to take to try to drive my personal growth and development towards that. I mean, people write goals every year. This is what I want to do in the new year. It's the same thing as that.
So Dawn, and then I think I skipped over Shar. So if I did, I'm sorry, but Dawn, go ahead.
Okay, so according, based on what Drew is saying, what I would recommend is we do a little adulting right now, and we hit some of that goal, come to the next meeting with what would you do if you wanted to fundraise. Think out of the box, just come up with something, and that way at least we've got one way going. We're not waiting for somebody else to tell us what they will or will not do. We've got a possibility going in the at least a direction. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting and we're going to be going around and around. I mean, I understand goals. I have goals every year, and I get the development, but we can't wait any longer. They are not suffering, and thank heavens that the city stepped in when they did, because no, we didn't know COVID was going to happen. Nobody knew, but thankfully the city did step in and are paying for the shelter this year. But that's not to say that it's going to go away next year. So I think that we need to be aggressive on this matter.
I agree. Go ahead, Shar.
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. While the committee no longer is needed to run the agency and does not have the same oversight role that it still did, the fact is that the fundraising expectation has not gone away. Whether or not you're a committee of a committee as you exist now, or a committee with revised draft ordinance, the fact is that fundraising responsibility still exists.
That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we will put this in this specific discussion in this parking lot that Shar gave us. But I like that, Dawn. Thank you for tasking us for our next meeting to come to the meeting with some ideas. So thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on. 8B is donations and fundraising report. I believe we're going to look to Jody for that. Has there been any significant donations or anything to the shelter that worth talking about or sharing?
No, I'm assuming that over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be getting our end of year donations in. Again, I expect they're probably going to be lower this year because a lot more people are in need of donations. And in all honesty, I haven't been pushing because I know that our costs have been down, and I'm not going to go out and beg people when I know that, people are still being generous. People are still giving. I put my numbers in this week. I think, let me find that. Just texted that to myself earlier. Give me a second here. All right. So this week so far online, we've only brought in $155. But last week we brought in over 1,000. So I do expect, because it's the end of the year, that we will be getting those gifts in. Although we are starting to get some medical bills now, because we do have, the heartworm dogs. Mostly it's been food, and our numbers have been low. So we've been doing fine.
Thanks, Jody. Next up is events. There are no events planned. I don't know if anyone had anything to add to the events section.
I'm all for having one. Anything.
Will there be cocktails?
I hope so.
Let's do a virtual dog walk.
Let's figure that out, Dawn. I like that. Sounds like there's a dog in the background that wants to attend. All right. Next up is grants. That's me. I have no suggestions, and none have come across my vantage point. We struck 8E. So that would bring us to new business. There's nothing under new business, which leads us to our next meeting is January 21st, 2021. Are we wanting to stick to that schedule? Go ahead, Char.
Well, I was going to say the legislature is moving forward on extending the Open Meetings Act provision that will allow us to continue to meet virtually into at least through the first quarter.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know. So plan on this. Go ahead, DC.
I just got one thing. Eileen did send me some wording and things on the volunteer recognition.
Oh, she did. Okay.
I wish she was here, because the only thing I was going to ask is this is a great thing, but would it be better to wait until we can do it in person, or do we still want to do this virtually with some sort of recognition?
Go ahead, Travis.
I think that we should probably wait to do it in person, because, I feel like eventually in-person meetings and nicer weather are going to come up hand in hand. And, I just feel that it might be better than doing it through a Zoom meeting. Just my thoughts anyway.
I think if I was going to get an award, I'd rather get it in person than on TV.
Sure.
But
absolutely, I agree with you.
It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. I have it, and I didn't do anything with it. I got it about a week ago. I didn't do anything with it knowing this meeting was coming up, just to kind of throw that out there to everybody.
Okay, it looks like Jody has a comment. Go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in person, I agree. And I think it would be nice to do it when Eileen is back in town so that she could attend, because she brought up both of the recipients.
Agreed. Okay, cool. Thanks, DC.
So let's just put that on the back burner for another meeting.
Our brand new parking lot.
Put it on our June agenda.
Okay. So the next meeting again, January 21st. Location's not TBD. Location sounds like it's going to be Zoom. And I guess just a reminder that I think we're supposed to do elections right away. So if anyone is interested in sitting where I'm sitting, I would love to hear about it. Go ahead, DC.
I may not be at the January 21st meeting or any meeting after that. This may be my last one, just FYI. Not that I'm quitting or anything.
Is there any more to that? Okay.
No, I have 18 months and 28 days, if anybody's asking, till I retire.
Nobody's asking.
We have 2 deputy chiefs, and we switch roles periodically, and it's coming to that time. So we've talked about when we move into the new station, Mike Moore and I will switch, and that may mean most likely he'll be the animal shelter representative at that point.
Okay.
But if that's the case, I'll miss you all, and I'll check in with you as much as possible.
Well, thank you. If this is your last meeting, thank you for everything you've done to help us There's been so much change since you came on board. It's been really good and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on almost retirement.
Thank you.
And if we
Thanks,
do,
Margaret.
if we do a huge fundraiser that is at Fifth Avenue, we will absolutely tap you on the shoulder.
If you guys do that fundraiser, I'm happy to be there and
Thank you.
provide all the other services that I promised I would provide.
Thank you.
That's great. Shar, you had your hand up for a sec.
I forgot.
Okay. All right. So again, elections next month.
Oh, I know what it was. I know.
Go for it.
Congratulations, Dawn, on being reappointed, or as of Monday, she will be reappointed to the committee.
Oh, cool. Yay. I forgot, Dawn, that you had to resubmit. Excellent. Thanks.
She ran a tough campaign.
What was that?
She ran a tough campaign to get reelected on there.
Unbeatable. All right. So is there a motion to adjourn? Travis?
Motion to adjourn.
Excellent.
I second.
Excellent. Like we're going around. Travis?
And a second by Drew Dunn. Yes.
Shar?
Yes.
Dawn?
Of course.
Drew?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
Liz? Yes. So the meeting adjourned 9:35. Thank you, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Happy holidays. See
Happy
you in the new
holidays.
year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.